Freedom of the press.
Self-determination.
Freedom of peaceful assembly. Freedom of association. And the democratic right to participate in political activities.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, my hands are so cold. Can you turn it up?
No.
It won't go any higher.
I'll hold it. I'll hold it.
Okay, you have to turn it. My name.
Closer to your mouth,
My
right
name
on it.
is Valerie Price, and I am the National Director of Act for Canada. Our motto is don't just love Canada, act for Canada. That's what we're doing today. We're gathered together to let our government know that we do not want Canada signing the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration next week in Marrakesh. We believe in controlled immigration. We do not believe in uncontrolled mass migration. Justin Trudeau and his immigration minister, Ahmed Hussein, plan to impose this newly defined human right in the form of a global compact on Canada. We are about to experience the fundamental transformation of our country that Obama envisioned for America. You're supposed to be turning the pages for me. Here, take it. Sorry about that. It's hard to hold this with cold hands. Dissent to this travesty will be squelched by a compliant press and a cooperative educational system under threat of punishment. Canadians find themselves facing a loss of national sovereignty and fundamental freedoms at the 11th hour as their signature on the Global Compact on Migration looms. There is little doubt that such a lack of transparency serves the purposes of political leadership that is not looking out for its constituents, but rather a globalist elite with other priorities in mind. Are you going to do this for me or no? I'm just going to remind you of a few of the key points. It's very quick. Migration will become a human right.
It's a privilege!
It's a privilege, you're right. Countries must promote the culture of these migrants and promote diversity to its citizens. Countries must help inform the migrants so that they best can choose which country they want to go to. That's what's in the compact. Countries must work to eliminate all forms of counter-expressions to this mass migration. Countries must sensitize and educate media professionals on migration-related issues and stop public funding to outlets that promote so-called intolerance. The Canadian government recently announced that it will be providing more than $600 million over the next 5 years to bail out the country's financially strapped media outlets. I'm so cold, you have no idea. This is how much I love my country. I was lying in bed in Montreal this morning in a nice, warm, cozy bed with my husband at 6:30, and I said, I'm going to send my speech to my confrères in Ottawa. They can stand up here and freeze their tushies off. Never mind. Here I am. I love this country. Hi, Gordon. Canadians ought to recoil from this slippery slope to some version of a state-controlled society that this deal has created. What we, the citizens, are never told is that all migration to date is from poor third-world countries to the well-off Western countries with established welfare systems. By signing this agreement, our country pledges to facilitate mass migrations, give equal rights and access to our social services to all migrants, and manipulate our media to prevent criticism of anything related to migrants. At best, economic refugees who haven't been persecuted either politically, oh my God, my hands are falling off, It's almost over. Either politically or religiously. President Trump was the first to make clear the disastrous consequences of this pact and pull the United States out. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, I wish that we had one here because he was the first person. Yay, Donald Trump! I hope he sees this. He was the first person to pull out of this. President Trump was the first to make clear the disastrous consequences of this pact and pull the United States out. In the meantime, virtually all of Eastern Europe and many others have pulled out, including Australia, Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Croatia, Denmark, Estonia, Dominican Republic, Hungary, Israel, Italy, Japan, Korea, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Russia. They're smart. But not Canada. No. Justin can't wait to get his hand on that pen and sign our country away. Maxime Bernier was the first politician in Ottawa to raise the alarm. Yay, Maxime! He was the first to raise the alarm on this global compact over a month ago. He exposed how the government was trying to keep it under the radar.
Thank you, Maxim.
Thank you, Maxim.
UK.
Justin was trying to keep this under the radar, much in the same way as he tried to keep motion M103, the anti-Islamophobia law, under the radar, so he would fool all the citizens and we wouldn't know what was going on. Fortunately, we have some smart people that find out the truth and expose it. In the House of Commons on Thursday, the Trudeau government was asked to reject the UN Global Compact on migration and to secure the border. The Liberals refused to give unanimous consent, defeating the motion and making their position clear. Shame! 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 Shame!
Shame on Trudeau! Shame on Trudeau!
We are here today, not just to love Canada, but to act for Canada. I thank you all for coming. I can't even feel my hands anymore. I have no hands. Okay. Unfortunately, this is the worst part of my speech, is that Maxime Bernier was not able to come today. He does send his regrets. He knows that he's got a lot of fans here. I'm his biggest one. Never mind. We'll have another day for Maxime. However, we have another wonderful thorn in the side of our government, and his name is Tom Quiggin, and he's going to be our next speaker. My hands are fucking. Yay, Tom! Yay, Tom! Okay, just quickly, because I hate long introductions. Tom Quiggin has 30 years of practical experience in security and intelligence matters. He's qualified as a court expert in the reliability of intelligence as evidence on terrorism in both the criminal and federal court. His years of practical experience include a variety of intelligence positions for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Canadian Armed Forces, the United Nations Protection Force in Yugoslavia, Citizen and Immigration Canada for war crimes, the International War Crimes Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the Privy Council of Canada, and the Bank of Canada.
And he knows his shit.
My hands are so... I'm going for a drink. Okay. This is really important. You've got to listen to this. This is why I love Tom the way I do, and why I love Maxime, because they're just thorns in the side of this government. He recently submitted a formal statement of complaint to the RCMP that members of Parliament of the Government of Canada are using their official positions to channel taxpayers' money down a path where they know that some of that money will land up in the hands of terrorists. This means that the taxpayer is subsidizing this activity, and funding terrorism is a criminal act according to the Criminal Code of Canada. So Tom is definitely another thorn. He is the primary contributor to the Quiggin report. If you don't get it, you should sign on for it. It's unbelievable. They're the best YouTubes you can possibly imagine. So please give a very, very warm welcome to Tom Quiggin.
Good morning. Bonjour les autres. Il y a quelqu'un qui vient de l'Acadie, je pense. Hello. Oui, beaucoup de monde Québec aussi. So, we got a son of Cuba the other day. We sent him to McGill University to learn what to say. They taught him about elitism and the globalization way, and he is the Prime Minister of Canada today. I was going to start this with a song. I was going to sing a song about Justin Trudeau and the UN, but the notes on the piano won't go that low, so we won't. Okay, so in the 1990s, I actually attended a cabinet meeting right there in that building as an intelligence officer discussing the threat from Yugoslavia and why we were there. In the past, I've served overseas in Albania, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Belarus, Russia, and every other hellhole you can imagine, which is where our government loves to send guys like me. That was always about the external threat. In the late 1990s, I worked for the Intelligence Assessment Secretariat, which directly serves the Cabinet and the Prime Minister, just behind the Langevin building right over there. In 1998, I testified to the Kelly Commission in the Senate about the foreign threat to Canada. Now, as an RCMP intelligence contractor, and yes, I worked for the RCMP for 6 years as an intelligence guy. Hello, RCMP. I testified in court in the Ontario Superior Court right over there in an Al-Qaeda-inspired terrorism case, and this was about the foreign threat to Canada. I testified at the Air India inquiry as an expert witness in front of Mr. Justice Major about the foreign threat to Canada. I testified multiple times to the House of Commons and to the Senate committees about the foreign threat to Canada. Now, I can tell you today, the biggest threat to Canada is not foreign, it's domestic. It's the government of Canada. It's the House of Commons. It's the Prime Minister's office, which sits over there in Langevin Block, or whatever we're supposed to call it now. Now, this is the reason I started the Quiggin Report, was to discuss matters of free speech, intelligence, security, and most importantly, the sovereignty of Canada. The submissive mainstream media, made weak and docile by its social justice warrior ethic and its willingness to take government handout money, will no longer tackle the tough issues. And this is sad. This is important. Fake news! Now, this is also the reason I wrote the book with several co-authors who are Muslims, Christians, and Jews, called Submission, The Danger of Political Islam to Canada, with a warning to America. This is also the reason I work with a bunch of different groups trying to bring this message to the Government of Canada, including Muslims Facing Tomorrow. The Government of Canada will not listen to them, they will only listen to foreign folks. It's sad. Now, we hire a Prime Minister to do what? To protect the interests of Canada, to advance Canada. He is the Prime Minister of a sovereign state. He is supposed to, according to the Constitution, provide us with peace, order, and good government. He's also supposed to support the Charter of Rights, to which we're entitled to security of the person. But Prime Minister Trudeau has signed our sovereignty away again and again and again.
Rick's phone got the but it's fixed now.
He signed our sovereignty away with NAFTA. Do you know that in order to negotiate now with a foreign country with a trade agreement, we have to get America's position? Trudeau signed that away. Now, the Paris Climate Agreement is a non-binding agreement, we are told. But yet, it is held to our heads like a gun, and we are told Canadians have to pay more and more and more carbon taxes because of a non-binding agreement. Now, here's just a funny thing, nothing to do with the speech really, but you get guys like David Suzuki, rich guy, Al Gore, rich guy, President Macron of France, rich guy, and Prime Minister Trudeau together to talk about climate change, and they decide the way to fix the climate is to put more taxes on the poor and more taxes on the middle class and give the money away to foreign countries. So the question has to be, how's that working out? How's that working out in France today? France is burning today because of carbon taxes, extremism, and uncontrolled migration. So here's my view on France. Hang on just a second. That's my view on France, folks. Now, we're told that the UN Compact on Migration is also a non-binding agreement, just like the climate agreement is a non-binding agreement. But Immigration Minister, the Honourable Ahmed Hussein, has already said the Government of Canada will lead the charge on the Global Compact. In other words, the Compact has already become an objective for the Government of Canada. It's become a policy for the Government of Canada. They've already said they're going to triple the rate of migration into Canada in the next 3 years. So, as Valerie mentioned, how bad is this agreement really? How will it affect our sovereignty, our media, our culture, our taxes? Well, other countries around the world are looking at this, and as Valerie has said, their people are speaking and their populations are saying no. Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Italy, the United States, Hungary, Austria, Belgium, Poland, Israel, Estonia, Czech Republic, Croatia, Dominican Republic, Latvia, Slovenia, Slovakia, Russia, Korea, Japan. Even Germany is having a fight inside the Reichstag over this, and the Parliament of New Zealand is doing the same thing. They are not happy. Now, what about here in Ontario? The Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, meets with Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario. The Prime Minister literally said in public that Premier Ford doesn't understand the migration problem. Now, what was it that Mr. Ford didn't understand? Mr. Trudeau explained to us in public that Mr. Ford doesn't understand that, quote, Mr. Ford is not aware of our international obligations to the UN. In other words, Prime Minister Trudeau believes that our UN obligations take precedent over Canadian immigration law. Now, remember, this was before the UN Global Compact on Migration. So it is clear to me that Mr. Trudeau will put the UN Compact above Canadian law and above the interests of the provinces.
He's a puppet!
Now, speaking of the provinces, qu'est-ce qui se passe de l'autre côté de la rivière, là? Qu'est-ce qui arrive à Quebec? Let me tell you what's going on in Quebec. Years ago, Quebec negotiated a separate agreement with the country where they control their own migration levels. Some folks didn't like that. Well, who looks like the smart province now? C'est pas nous autres, là.
Viva le Québec!
C'est pas nous autres qui... ben nous autres, on peut-être pas tellement bright, je ne sais pas, anyway. Now, Prime Minister Trudeau has also told the world that there is no such thing as Canadian values. He told the foreign press... He told the foreign press there is no Canadian core identity. There is no mainstream. We are a post-national state. He actually said this out loud.
He's a fucking Prime Minister of Canada there.
In short, Mr. Trudeau does not put Canada first. He supports the United Nations first, and he puts their views above those of our own. Now, This is the same United Nations that has Pakistan and Iran on a Human Rights Council. Figure that. Two of the world's worst dictatorships that are the most misogynistic, women-beating countries in the world that produce the largest amount of terrorists in the world. And we are supposed to take advice from people like them.
Craziness!
Now, this week in the United Nations actually had a vote and said Hamas is not a terrorist group. This is a group of people who perfected the art of suicide bombing and used children to deliver suicide bombs. And for some reason, rather, we're supposed to believe they're not a terrorist group. And these are the people from whom we are supposed to be taking advice. For this reason alone, I think we should jump the entire process and Mr. Trudeau should say no to the UN Compact. Now, let me just close this off quickly. There's a guy by the name of Gerard Butts who kind of works over there. Depending on your point of view, he is either an advisor to the Prime Minister or he's the guy that controls the Prime Minister. I don't actually know, not for me to say. But Mr. Gerard Butts actually says if you disagree with the Prime Minister, if you make fun of him when he uses words like people kind, you are literally a Nazi. Gerard Butts actually said that. He said Canadians are alt-right Nazis for making fun of Trudeau's use of the term people kind. So, let me just say this. Mr. Gerard Butts, why do you think Canadians are hostile to Mr. Trudeau? They're hostile to Mr. Trudeau because Mr. Trudeau is hostile to Canadians. Mr. Trudeau likes Cuba. He admires the basic dictatorship of China. His words, not mine. He loves Iran. But yet he is hostile to Canadians. So, Mr. Trudeau, I say this to you. Go back and look at previous prime ministers. Look at Sir John A. Macdonald. Look at Sir Wilfrid Laurier. Look at Mike Pearson. Look at Deeth the Chief. Those people upped their status. They upped their efforts. They upped unity in Canada. They upped our ability to work as a country. Mr. Trudeau, they upped their prestige. Mr. Trudeau, up yours!